Good evening. Welcome to Live from NYPL and NBF Presents Reading the City. I'm Ruth Dickey, the Executive Director of the National Book Foundation, and I want to begin with a round of thanks to all of you watching and to these extraordinary authors joining us this evening. Thank you to the New York Public Library for their partnership, and thank you to the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation for their support of NBF Presents. The National Book Foundation is best known as the presenter of the National Book Awards, which have honored the best literature in America since 1950. The awards fuel our education and public programs across 40 states and counting, in person and online. This season's events all lead up to the 72nd National Book Awards ceremony on November 17th, which will be held exclusively online. You're all invited to come celebrate with us. Please do, and don't forget to RSVP at nationalbook.org/awards. And now a bit about tonight's program. Together with the New York Public Library, we're excited to gather four of our favorite New Yorkers, National Book Award honored authors Taffy Brodesser-Akner, Lisa Coe, and Jacqueline Woodson in conversation with the irreplaceable Isaac Fitzgerald. All of these wonderful authors have books available for you to read. If you have a New York Public Library card or live in New York State and want to apply for one now, you can borrow books from any of tonight's authors and millions of others for free. Or if you're able, you can buy books by tonight's speakers from the library shop. Proceeds go to benefit the library. Links to buy the book can be found in the chat and on the events page found at nypl.org/live. I also wanted to share a few quick housekeeping items. Toward the end of the conversation, the authors will be happy to answer your questions. Over the course of the program, please send in your questions using either the chat, the Google form, or by emailing publicprograms@nypl.org, and the panel will get to as many as they can. Last, real-time captions are available for tonight's program. You can click on the closed caption button or use the stream text link shared in the reminder email or chat or in the chat for a live transcript. And now I'm delighted to turn things over to our guests. Thanks so much for being with us and enjoy the program.
Thank you. I don't know how to unmute myself, but Ruth, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ruth.
Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I like to clap at these things. It's going to happen a lot. If you at home are feeling like you want to clap a little bit as well, you are more than welcome to, as long as you know it's not making too much noise that's going to bother anyone else. Welcome. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to be in conversation with these wonderful, wonderful authors. And I wanted to start off by saying, everybody, it is actually Taffy's birthday, and she took time out of her birthday day. So let's give her a warm round of applause.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. This is a great way to celebrate a birthday, at least the 46th birthday. Happening there.
I love it. But that's it. We are here to celebrate you, and we are here to celebrate New York City. And so I know a few of you grew up in New York City, but I wanted to start with like a large open-ended question, and I'm going to do my best to delegate. Taffy, because it's your birthday, it doesn't seem like a present. I'm going to ask you to go first. That's, now that I say it out loud, maybe didn't think about it very well. But when did you first fall in love with New York City? You grew up here, but when was that moment where it really clicked?
I grew up here, and I was always like an observer, like a good observer. And I would notice how many people moved here. And when I went to college, I went to NYU, and there were so many interesting people who could not wait to get to New York. And along the way, I heard somebody say, if you don't live where you're from, you live in New York. And I thought, I don't know if I'm a person who would have been creative enough to get here if I'd been born elsewhere, but I was really, really glad that I was here because it suits my temperament. I've lived in 2 other cities in my life, in 2 other states, and it didn't work out.
Oh, come on, name names. Where are we talking?
I'll name some names. Los Angeles, I'm looking at you. New Jersey, it's not me, it's you. I'm gonna say it. But I also remember reading books when I was young that took place in New York, and so many of them did. And I remember having a moment where I thought, like, it couldn't be that everybody is being given books that take place in their state. Like, in that way, I understand the sort of knock against it, that like a lot of writers come here, a lot of writers publish out of here, but it was a great place to grow up because it felt so relevant. It felt so right.
I love that. Lisa, what about yourself?
Yeah, I feel like I can't remember a time that I wasn't in love with New York. And I feel like part of being in love with New York is also hating New York. You know, it's like part of the same coin, but like two sides of the same coin of being a New Yorker. I was born in Queens, and then my parents moved out to the Jersey suburbs, and there I was raised. So Taffy, I see your face, and I agree with you. I always felt like I was a New Yorker, like being raised in exile in some ways. Suburban life was, you know, grueling in its own ways in the 80s. And New York was always sort of like the thing that was like in proximity. You know, that's where my dad worked for the phone company, commuted here every day. We came here to have dinner in Chinatown, buy groceries, see friends. And so it always felt like it was like the promise of what was to come, I think, you know, very, even as a teenager, like I would come down here and like buy records and like hang out with friends and see shows. And I actually remember, like, you know, some of my earliest fiction writing forays, even before I knew really what I was doing, was writing like when I was like 14 or 15 or 13, writing these stories of 20-year-olds living in the East Village, you know, and like it was a very like Cheers vibe. Some of them hung out at a local bar, and they were all like artists and writers trying to make it in the city. And so it was clearly like a projection and like a fantasy that was kind of like half grounded in reality and half, you know, the delusions of like a middle schooler.
I want to read those. Do you still have them?
It's so woke too that you knew to ground, you know, to place them in the East Village.
I know.
You knew exactly what was going on. Lisa, can I ask real quick, when did you get to come back? When did you get to move back to New York?
Right after college. So yeah, in my early 20s. And I also like spent some time in California. I was living in San Francisco for 4 years. And then I came back because I feel like I could either choose to be happy or to write a book. And so I came back to New York to write a book.
Well said. Well said. And funny. Jacqueline, what about yourself? Also, again, you've spent time here as a child.
Yeah, my family moved here when I was 7, and so in that way, it's all. Even though I feel grounded in the South in this way, like New York has always been home, and it hasn't been this idea of, it's not a place you leave for good. And so I went away I went to Long Island for college, and then I came back, and I was always coming back because I was coming back to go to the clubs in the city, even though I was on school there and at school there. And then when I moved to San Francisco for a year, but my friends were all still here. I moved to Provincetown for 5 years, but I would still come back, and I would always call myself a New Yorker. And it's interesting because I grew up in Bushwick, and I grew up, I was there, going to clubs in the 80s when cabs wouldn't bring you home. Like if you were at a club in the city and you told them you wanted to go to Bushwick, they would just drive off like that. And I always thought that being a Brooklynite, even though it's so grounded in New York, that being a Brooklynite was kind of on the outside of the New York experience. At the same time, because I was growing up, watching Saturday Night Live, and the guy would always, that comedian who was like, "I'm from Jersey. You from Jersey? What exit?" Like I knew Jersey was not an option. Like it was just, or even going to the clubs, and there were the Bridge and Tunnel people, and then there were us, and we were the, cool people. And I didn't even consider Brooklyn Bridge and Tunnel, because we either went through a tunnel or over a bridge, but it totally, it was. But I just, I feel, so grounded in the city to the point where I don't always trust people who transplant here. I'm like, one day you're gonna go back. Whereas us in New York, this is home. And it's funny because my daughter's in DC now, and she's always at college, and she's always trying to get back here. She's like, who would want to live anywhere else? So I'm like, honey, you will want to live somewhere else for a little while, hopefully, but of course you're gonna want to spend the rest of your life here.
I feel like that's got to be a tough thing, like to grow, not a tough thing, but like a very interesting thing to grow up in one of the most vibrant places on the planet. Because then when you do go to other cities, you're like, hang on a second, hang on a second. And I feel you, Jacqueline, about, even, I myself, I remember in the I'm pretty sure it was up until the 2000s, cabs would not bring you back to Brooklyn. But at the same time, I have this view of like, oh, if I can see the Manhattan skyline, I'm not like in it, which feels wild, right? Because it's such a big, like there's so many different boroughs, there's so many different experiences of New York City. But Taffy, I wanted to build off something that you said, and I'm gonna mix it up here. I won't make you start first this time. Lisa, we'll start with you. But you mentioned so many books. I mean, obviously yourselves, of course, but so many different stories, so many, movies, music, so much comes from New York. So do you remember, Lisa, what was like the first book about New York City, or maybe like either it's about New York City or it took place in New York City that you loved? And did it inform your work later?
Yeah, it's funny. I recently returned to two books that I read, I think maybe like my first or second year of college. The first was Audre Lorde's memoir, Zami, Story of My Name. And then the second was Jessica Hagedorn's The Gangster of Love. And I found them on my bookshelf, and I hadn't probably read them for 20 years, and just returned to them, this past winter when I was like stuck at home, and realized like belatedly how much they had influenced my life. They're both stories of young women from immigrant families coming or already living in New York and just basically trying to make their art, as a writer or as a musician. And I think there was something really profoundly like transformative about reading those at such a young age, even before I sort of like was able to connect the dots about what I wanted to do and like who I was. And yeah, it's kind of cool to like be able to return to that like in my 40s and kind of like see the trajectory of that. But yeah, I always say like I'll never write another New York novel, but on the other hand, like I feel like I keep doing it. Like, what else do I know? And maybe I need to like move to New Jersey in order to like write my next book. Just kidding.
A lot of Jersey talk. Lisa, can I ask you said it was because it was winter, but like what drew you, why were you picking, like what do you think brought you back to those two books?
It could just be like the pandemic winter, and that particularly like bleak time that happened last year, and like kind of like going through like the bookshelves in this room that I spent all this time in and never look at, and just being like, oh yeah, this book, I've moved this book back and forth between like probably 15 different apartments. And there's something about it that just felt like, maybe it's the time to like pick up this old friend and see how it's doing.
Love that. Jacqueline, what about yourself?
I think the two books that come to mind, I love that you mentioned Zami because I haven't read that in so many years, and now I want to go back and read it. And I'm surprised no one's made a movie of it. That's what it was such a visual book for me. But the books that come to mind off the top of my head are Another Country. James Baldwin's Another Country, because they were living in the city and they were so, there was some of them were so poor and some of them were not, but you really just got this sense of an old New York in the book. And Brown Girl, Brown Stones. I remember reading that as a young person and wanting to live in a brownstone. They were so foreign to me at that time. I lived in a townhouse, and it wasn't even called a townhouse. It was a 3-story, 2-family house. But just the way even the wood or the banisters, I had always wanted to live in a house with stairs that I could, run up and down, and those books. So I feel like Brown Girl, Brown Stones really made me love this other Brooklyn that I hadn't yet experienced. And then Another Country made me really love Manhattan, this Manhattan that was very foreign to me.
Taffy, what about yourself?
I love Zami too. I think I'm gonna read Zami tonight. I read it in college too, and I remember this one scene of like her mother putting her out on the porch with like the stoop, right? The stoop with to bundle her up, which was like this very kind of Brooklyn-y thing we could do. Like you would like something would happen if you were wearing a coat inside, like your body temperature. It was like an old wives' tale. And anyway. Mine, I think the first one was very early, and it was Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. It was a Judy Blume book, and it was this kid who lived in the city. I also grew up in Brooklyn. I also grew up in a place that cabs would not go. I grew up in Canarsie, and not even trains would go there. And Peter Hatcher in Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing is this city kid. And in the sequel to it, Super Fudge, he moves to a New Jersey suburb, and it's like devastating to him. But when he's in the city, it's like this casual way that he just goes to the park and he rides the elevator and he's friends with his doorman. And he just has this, like, he just sort of skips through the city. And I, as like an 8-year-old, felt that I was in this provincial satellite office to Manhattan. And because I was born in Manhattan and then we moved. But like, to me, it felt like the height of sophistication that a 9-year-old boy would know his, like, the elevator operator in his building and be able to walk his dog on like Lexington Avenue or wherever they were.
It's so funny. I just got a bunch of Judy Blume books. I'm going to send them to you, Taffy, as a birthday present after.
Please.
So they just sent me like 5 of them, including Super Fudge.
I feel like I remember this too, as somebody that did not grow up in the city. One of my first visits was, at a young age, but I just remember seeing nothing like it. And, but like, definitely it was like, oh man, kids that had a mastery of the New York City subways. And I was like, whoa. And like, still to this day, I'm a 38-year-old human being, still to this day. Like, I'll meet somebody that grew up in there. They're like, yeah, when I was 8, I was on the sub. I was like, whoa, that is cool.
It is very cool when people know.
Yeah, exactly. Like when you're like, oh, you were a kid on the sub, that's impressive. All right, so Jacqueline, I'm gonna start with you for this one, which is like, and what a perfect question. Like, you have written such beautiful things about the city, and we're talking, there are different neighborhoods, there are different boroughs, there are all sorts of different ways to experience New York City. But how does New York City influence your writing? What about the city inspires you?
I think the thing that inspires me most is that it's ever changing. As Taffy was saying about coming back to New York and Brooklyn getting super cool in this way, like where it was corny at one point, right? And, or it was staid, or even looking at Bushwick, I remember as a kid, we would lie and say we lived in Ridgewood because we were ashamed to say we lived in Bushwick. And now I hear, white boys lying and saying they live in Bushwick. And I'm like, no, that address is Ridgewood. Like, it's so interesting because it's so hipster cool. Because of that, it's always a world that you can enter from a different perspective, right? And have a different story to tell. So I don't have to go anywhere, but the world that I'm writing about continues to change. And so, and the neighborhoods are so different. Like, the story that I set in Park Slope is going to be very different than the story I set in Bed-Stuy, or the story I set in Canarsie, or the story I set in Jackson Heights, Queens. So I just love that I feel like it's almost infinite and in its story. So I have written outside of New York, but I always come back. I feel like this is where, for me, the depth of the story lives.
Yeah, it's one of the things I love when I'm reading a book, especially about living in the city now, because I feel like I used to read about New York and I'd have to imagine it, right? Mm-hmm. Now sometimes I'll be reading a book, and I feel like I've even experienced this, Jacqueline, with your books. Like, I'll be reading and I'll be like, oh, I actually know where we're talking about. Like, I have a place right in mind. Do you have like a story you could share with us, or like just a moment, like something you remember almost pulling from exactly in this city?
Yes, definitely. In Red at the Bone, where they go to Iris and Aubrey, 2 of the main characters, go to a park in Bushwick and they're jamming, which means that a DJ has come and he's set up, 2 turntables and speakers, and he's taken like 6 extension cords and plugged them together and plugged it into a street lamp to, get the electricity from there and all the teenage kids have come to the park to dance. And that was right out of my teenhood. And so
that's how they did it? They plugged it into a street lamp?
Yes.
This has been an enduring mystery of my life.
Yes, they pulled the panel out and figured that out. It was
That's so dangerous.
And genius at the same time.
Oh, of course, absolutely. But as a mother, I'm 46 today. It's dangerous.
It's so true. I look back on it. And then so that was definitely, and when I was writing Red at the Bone, I went back to that park, which is very different. Now they have AstroTurf and it's more of a soccer park. But I just went and stood in the space where we danced to try to bring the memory of it back. And the street lights are still there, all of the fence is still there that the extension cord snaked through. So a lot of it has stayed the same, but a lot of it's changed too.
That's incredible. There's also, just to say, portable batteries have become more of a thing.
I didn't realize.
There are ways to do it now.
I have a friend who basically talked about recently having, this is one of those pandemic memories of just like, there was somebody that used to go through Prospect Park with a portable karaoke machine. No joke.
Whoa.
I've seen that guy.
Yeah. At least I think on a bike, maybe.
Yeah, it sounds
That's
familiar.
so funny.
And then being like, for X amount of dollars, I'll stop. And especially during right, everybody would be drinking outside. Nobody could everybody would be outside. All right, for X amount of dollars, I'll stay here for X amount of minutes while y'all have an outdoor karaoke.
Oh my goodness.
That's why I love the city.
So fabulous.
Taffy, what about yourself? How does New York City influence your writing? What about the city inspires you? And I'm going to ask the same follow-up. Same to you, Lisa. No, not to give it away.
Okay, so how does it influence? I'll tell you that, like Jacqueline said, it was very embarrassing to be from Brooklyn. It was all we had was like, who's the boss? And Tony Danza, who had left to move to Connecticut. It was so embarrassing that my sister would say we were from the tri-state area.
Instead of from Brooklyn.
Yeah, we were from Canarsie, and by the way, I went to live in Los Angeles for 10 years, and I came back like a thawed caveman. And people were like, I would watch Girls, and they would be going to a party in Bushwick, and I'd be like, what's that? What did they just say? What do you mean? But then again, I was someone that when they told me that Williamsburg was going to be the next Greenwich Village, I said, oh, I don't think that's true, which is why I don't make good real estate decisions. Part of what happened to me was I was away, and I had this kind of imagining of New York, first as 90s New York, and also as 80s New York, because I read all of those, I read Donna Tartt and Bret Easton Ellis and all of and Erica, even 70s New York. I used to love Erica Jong books for 70s New York. But when I came back and I was writing a book, I have an Aunt Lois. My Aunt Lois, who lives on the Upper East Side and has all my life, would offer me her apartment so that I could work on my book. And I was writing this book about, I know, she's amazing. I was writing this book about Upper East Siders. And because I was on the Upper East Side, and because I was so shocked about the way things had changed and how it was always a lot of money on the Upper East Side, but it was also there was also kind of a high low to it. And now it just seemed to me when I was there a homogenous plastic surgery, it was one big soul cycle. Everyone would, and in my book, if you read my book, you could see the way that's shocking to me. All these women wearing spiritual gangster shirts and all these going past the 92nd Street Y and not being able to tell if the man picking up the child is the child's father or the child's driver. Those are the things that were shocking to me in a way that they absolutely shouldn't have been, but I was very naive as a young person. And I didn't really understand how corrupt the money was. I just thought it seemed really nice. And then coming back as an adult who understood the disappearing middle class and gentrification and all of those things, these people became these outsized villains to me of like, this is what you did with your money. You went to Soul Cycle. Like that's the thing that New York, it became in the interim, it became impossible to live in New York. That was the difference between when I left and when I came back. And very much in my book is the distress of living outside the city and not being able to come home.
But do you, the East Side has changed, right? It's now the place that younger people live because it's more affordable.
You know, it always was. It was always secretly this like, the last, like Jonathan Franzen said, it's like the last middle class neighborhood in New York because you can live there in like a railroad apartment. In Manhattan. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Not to be the outside. I know New York.
Oh my God, yes.
I'm an outside. So like, sorry, go.
For saving me from that. But even like it's strangely like that. But the money end of it, which encroaches and all of these buildings that were like 4 stories tall are replaced with these things with pools in them and tennis courts and finance people, like made it impossible to live here. Like oligarchs made it impossible to live here. And when people are talking about how in the pandemic, the city became unlivable, I would drive in from New Jersey and I would drive through it. And it reminded me of in the 90s when I was in college, you could drive through New York. You forget that Manhattan's really small, which you don't know anymore because of the traffic, but you could just go from end to end in a few minutes sometimes, especially at night. And the thing that made it unlivable was not anything about the pandemic. There's certainly not anything about like the cries of crime. It was the finance people. It was the oligarchs. It was the soul cycles. The soul cycles made New York unlivable.
I feel like you did describe a scene in your book, if I'm remembering it correctly, but to ask that question, what is one of those, like very specifically, what is something you pulled from New York City that has made its way into your writing?
I think when I think about those t-shirts in Fleishman is in Trouble that have like, that are kind of these cries for help, that people are just walking around in these like message t-shirts, which have changed over the course of time. Those are the things that I think of that went in. And also like from the time I was very young, the sophistication of Manhattan children, like every time I would meet, I mean, I hope my kids aren't watching this, but like every time I would meet kids from Manhattan, I'd be like, that I would take legal advice from that child. And my kids couldn't cross the street because we were in the suburbs. I was like, I don't think you can cross a large street yet. And so in my book, I had these 2 kids who were like little adults. And it was my dream for my children that they'd be little adults. Please move on from me.
No, I love it. I'm going to get legal advice very soon. Lisa, what about yourself? How does New York City influence your writing? I mean, like you said, New York City writing, like novels, but like, what about this city inspires you?
Yeah, I mean, I think so much of what Jackie and Taffy said, also resonates with me. I think a lot about like just the span of New York history, my own New York history, my fantasy of New York history. Like I was also like reading about the 70s, like when I was a teenager, and just be like, I just wish I was alive and able to go to clubs in 1977. I mean, I was alive, but I was like 2. But and then like even the history before that, I was always very, interested in like early 1900s, late 1800s New York history, and just to be able to map how the city has changed in the same geography that is both so familiar to like us as longtime New Yorkers and to like the public imagination, because New York is like everywhere, right? So there's like, it's always that kind of like peculiar feeling that the city both like belongs to me and then absolutely doesn't belong to me. And I feel it so, I feel like I feel it so much more acutely the longer I stay. Like the kind of more creepy, sometimes it feels like all those new buildings, like in downtown Brooklyn and like downtown Manhattan. There's definitely times I'm like walking around and just being like, where am I? Like, like what's happened? Like, what's going on? So I think that is something that always like, both informs my writing and just like the question of like, how do we get here? And like, how did we get from then to now? And where are we going? And a lot of like, I think what Jacqueline mentioned, like the ways that the neighborhoods change are always something that's always interesting to me. So in my novel, The Leavers, like, the Chinatown I grew up going to that was like full of Cantonese immigrants in the 80s and is now, mostly Fujianese families now in the aughts and in the 10s or the 20s or whatever decade it is, it's something that's like interesting to me in terms of like what's at the root of that changing and like how does that look like when the same blocks that you grew up with are now shaped in a sort of different way and in some ways are exactly the same.
Absolutely right. And what about yourself? Can you give an example of like one of these, either the DJ moment or the Manhattan t-shirts or small children, but just no, listen, I just want to say, I agree with you. That's how I still get intimidated. But do you have like a scene or a memory or a moment that you're like, you definitely pulled it from the city and it ended up in your writing?
I think a lot of my characters are also like people new to New York as well. So, it's like I get to kind of experience that through the characters' eyes. And there's a scene in The Leavers where my two main characters are taking a subway for like the first time. And it really reminds me of like a very falling in love New York moment I did have after moving here in my 20s when I was taking the subway over the Manhattan Bridge and just kind of seeing, like seeing the lights and like seeing the train emerge from the tunnel and just having that kind of like heart lurch moment where you're like, oh, like I'm home, this is it. And so I kind of like gave that to my characters and let them experience that too.
Love that. I'm gonna steal that real quick and I'm gonna go back to you, Jackie, and you, Taffy. Do you have like that moment, right? Because you have all both spent time here, left, and then come back. So do you have one of those moments where you're coming back to the city and I'm going to do this a free for all, whoever feels they have it first.
In a book or?
No, just in your own personal life, just like Lisa was kind of describing. I mean, Lisa eventually does put it into a book, but just one of those moments where you came back to the city and you were just like, you kind of felt the reconnection happening.
I have two of those. One, I don't remember if it's the D train or the B train, but there's that place where it's going through the tunnel right before it goes out onto the bridge, where you see all that colorful graffiti through the bars. And it's just so beautiful. It has the lights shining on it. And
do you remember when that was the D train?
Wait, which one was the D train?
Didn't it used to be the D train that did that?
Maybe it still is. We don't have the D train anymore? Do we?
No, it's not.
No,
okay.
Also,
so yeah,
sorry.
So I was saying I can't remember if it was the D or the B that did that. So yeah, you're right. It is the D. And that is a heart stopper for me. And this past weekend, my friend Corey, who just moved here, and I walked across the Brooklyn Bridge. I haven't done it in years and years. And it was so, they've separated it. So now there's a bike lane and a walking lane on it. It used to be that we were all together, the bikers and the walkers, but now it's just all walkers on one side. And it was packed. It was absolutely packed. I mean, and lots of unmasked packedness too. So of course, Corey and I are like completely masked up, but going across it. And then as you walk, it was so deeply diverse. It was just everybody, and they're like climbing up on the railings, not afraid to fall into the water. But it was so beautiful to me. And at one point I just turned around and looked back and I was like, I'm on the Brooklyn Bridge, I'm walking to Manhattan, and I could do this every day if I want. And it was just a very sobering moment.
I have the same thing too. By the way, I didn't mean to fact check you.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all.
Just for the record, I think everybody's talking about the same thing. I would refer to it as the Q train, but I think it's the same
I think it's all of the above.
Yeah.
So
That's
funny.
so interesting. I have the same experience, Jacqueline, of like almost wanting to make like snow angels in the city and like just like love it. And I think maybe that's something that you only get when you return to it, right? Like that I've had a couple of experiences. I moved back to New York in June, and I can tell you that I've had a realization that the reason I was so unhappy everywhere else is because if you are raised on the convenience of this city, like you just, unless you really need to be somewhere else, like for your like for emotional reasons or for your like anxiety, there is nothing that will ever replace like Chinese food on the block where you live, next to a place where you could get a sandwich. Like I've gained like 10 pounds just being like, I'm gonna eat all the food on this block because I can.
So true. And it's so good.
It's so good. And it's so good, right? It's like everything is excellent. But the experience I keep having is when I find myself in two things. When I find myself in Central Park and I look above the tree line and see the buildings, and I think like all of these changes happen, and I don't know, with all the corruption and all the reasons, I'm like really into land use. I think it's like the weirdest category of law. With all of the corruption, they managed to keep this park. Like, I can't believe there's not a tower in the park where you could live for like $1 billion. Like, I can't believe it. I can't believe they've managed to figure that out. And then the other thing is that every time I have dinner with somebody, every time I go to a book launch, even yesterday, I had a meeting with a bunch of other writers, and coming home, being in the same place as the thing, like living in the thing, living close to the flame of the life you're living, as opposed to what it used to be, which was like, I hope this dinner is worth it because I have either a 50-minute $100 Uber home or like 45 minutes with a bunch of Rangers fans on a train, and they'll either be angry because they won or angry because they lost. I can't even figure it out. But to be there, like every time I walk into my apartment building now, I cannot believe it. Like, to be where you need to be who you are, and not to live kind of as a shadow version of yourself where you're only really alive sometimes. That's been like my experience of coming back.
That is beautiful. And I'm just, listen, I'm skipping a couple of my own questions real quick. I do also just want to take a moment to let everyone know that you're watching. You are more than welcome. Please leave your questions and we'll have a little bit of a Q&A session here at the end. So if you have a question that you're dying to ask, please feel free to leave it there in the comments, and we will try to get to it. But I want to kind of keep this, Taffy, that's so beautiful. I want to kind of keep this love train going with Lisa. I'm going to start with you. I'm going to do it around the horn again. But like, what was something that you weren't able to do last year? You're in New York City, whether you were out of town or you know, obviously because of the pandemic, you're here in the city. What was something you weren't able to do here in New York City last year that you're absolutely relishing getting to do either now or maybe you're planning to do in the not so distant future? Because let's be honest, I'm just going to acknowledge it. Last year, garbage. This year, murky. Still tough, like Jacqueline, like you said, masking up on. You're still on the Brooklyn Bridge, still, you know, like. But what is something you relish being able to do now, or you plan to do in the not so distant future?
I mean, I think it's just being able to hang out indoors with my friends. I'm like a very veteran, like New York City biker, so I spend a lot of time just biking around. And what you said, Taffy, about being in the place, like, I mean, that I feel that's so profoundly when I'm like on the bike. I feel like, you know, and it's one of those things that makes me feel like I can never leave, because it's like, where else can I, you know, just see like 5 different people in one day, just kind of tooling around Brooklyn, and it's so easy. And yeah, I think one of the silly things that I've taken up recently is doing like indoor karaoke with friends. We each have our personal mic because we're not quite ready to go back into, the actual K-Town rental rooms. So we've decided to sort of do our own at-home karaoke lounge. So that's, I guess, the thing that
Are you all in the
very
same
excited about.
Walk us through this.
Are you doing it via Zoom or you
No,
guys are
in
together?
person. Yeah. So
Oh,
we each have our own mics. We bought like these Bluetooth mics, and then we just
Should we
like
all
put them
try
in
it
the house.
Nice.
Do you get snacks? Do you try to do
Get
like
snacks. Yeah. Try to, replicate the experience as much as possible.
What's your song, Lisa?
have party lights going?
It's in the works. It might be a long winter, so get back to me in a few months.
You just gave me a damn good. Yeah, I'm gonna make a.
Let's do it.
Lisa started a
Wireless
revolution.
karaoke mic.
I love that. And Taffy, what about yourself?
What am I going to do?
No, or what do you relish this year about New York City that you just weren't able to experience last year, or do you have something in the not too distant future?
Today, my family still lives in Brooklyn, and today we had lunch for my birthday, and it was not a big deal. Like, it was not like the end of the world. It was not like a traffic nightmare. The thing I have been doing lately is I've been going to the theater, which is like, I can't even believe that we agree to sit in this, like, it's a miracle that anyone ever thought, like when you're far away from something for long enough and you can't believe it's real, when you get back to it and you're like, who thought of this? Theater is amazing. But I've done that. I took my son, my 13-year-old, to see Goodfellas at Film Forum. And I was like my parents when they would visit me at NYU, and I'd say, this used to be a restaurant. You weren't allowed to walk down the street here without getting killed. Like, it was such a great experience to finally be that person. And also for my children to see movies that aren't Marvel movies. They don't have that everywhere, like they don't have theater. They don't have people who don't like we were in a place that was all about luxury. It was all about the safety of making sure that you never have to feel an emotion that you did not opt into. And my children are learning about how life works. They're learning about people who are crying on a street. They're learning about the subway. They're learning, those are the things that I'm most looking forward to, is finally introducing them to real life and to what a human's obligation in the world is. At least to know what it is, what's going on.
One quick question, because theater is a big one I haven't done it yet, but I'm very excited to get back and seeing a play or a musical. Can I ask, what was one that you saw that just like felt great?
I saw the Freestyle Love Supreme, and I left. I could have danced home, and I think it's only going till January. And if you don't go to it, and if you do go to it, tell me and I'll go with you. It was so uplifting, and it was, I think, glorious is the only word. Glorious. It was glorious.
Oh, that's so good to know. I'm
was
so
like,
excited to see
You can't
it.
believe it. You can't believe how engaging it is. You can't believe how beautiful it is. And you can't believe how much you don't have to compromise your values in order to be there and enjoy it. It's like a very of the moment thing that is also so joyful. Like, it lives in the moment and it chooses joy. Go see it. Report back. Everyone go see it and report back.
That's awesome.
I love that. What about you, Jacqueline?
I was just bonding with Taffy for a second because I live with a 13-year-old boy. So who actually goes to school on the Upper West Side. So it's like on the Upper West Side. So it's an extended day program, which I'm very thankful for because it takes him so long to get to school and get back. But I think the thing that I am really looking forward to, for the past, my daughter is 19, for the past 18 years, we've gotten together every single Sunday as an extended family. It's like 13 of us, to have Sunday family dinner. And when the pandemic hit, it stopped. And then the two youngest went off. I mean, the two seniors went off to college. And so it, it just kind of dissipated in this really heartbreaking sort of way, to that point where it's like, it's Sunday, what are we doing? And we were up in Brewster, our little family was up in Brewster, and then people were just so scattered. So now that we're all back in New York City, I'm looking forward to the point where we all feel safe enough to do that kind of gathering again. And I think once everyone gets their booster, we'll be back to Sunday family dinner.
Yeah.
That sounds wonderful.
And y'all are all invited.
I'm going to do one quick, like almost a lightning round before we get to the questions from our audience here, the very thoughtful questions from our audience. Thank you so much. Basically, like, let's say we're making a New York City mixtape, walking around, riding our bike, Lisa, however you want to do it. We're going through the city, especially right now. I feel like we're really feeling it. But to own it as well, we're maybe we're going to enjoy autumn, but winters aren't the easiest, especially right now. But what's a song or two that you might put on?
Oh my goodness.
For New York City. No pressure. No pressure at all.
Oh my goodness, that's hard.
I'll do it.
I was gonna say,
Yours will be less basic than mine, so don't worry. Mine is The Only Living Boy in New York.
Oh,
I think that's like a perfect song.
Especially,
I don't think it has anything to do with New York.
oh.
I would say the Alicia Keys Empire State of Mind.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I think I would put Stone Soul Picnic by the Fifth Dimension, just because it's about everything that's New York, even though it's not New York. It's very West Coast in this way, but it's it's like weed and chilling and like just being a part of a moment and enjoying like that presence of mind. So yeah, and it just has such a good vibe to it.
Be in there. That I won't lie. There's a part of me that wants to just keep doing that, and then we're gonna build the New York City playlist. But I do want to get to some of these questions. How and Jackie, you just gave a great response, but I'm going to start with you again on this one. How does living in New York engage your sense of writing / literary community? Like, what about New York?
It's such a great question, because I think we're spoiled as New Yorkers because our people are here. So many of our people are here, and I know I'm finding this in the adult writing world as well, but in the world of young people's literature, we're all deeply connected. I mean, like I have, like Jason, I have friends that I text every single day, or that, I say, come sit on my stoop and, let's talk about the struggles of the book we're writing now. And so I think there is this way in which we have this connection that is this city, but we also have this deep connection that is about having known each other through the journey and the struggle for so many years, and being able to talk about it, and be transparent about it. So I don't know if I lived. I mean, I think of Saeed, who's in Ohio now, but is still very connected to us in New York through social media and all the ways in which Saeed stays connected. And I think about
him on Thursday.
Say it again.
I said I'm having lunch with him on Thursday. So but keep going.
And there's this way, and Hanif too. Hanif is another New Yorker another Buckeye who's very connected to writers. And I feel like the people who are physically here are the people I get to, say, what, I'm so done with this manuscript. Let's meet in 10 minutes, So that kind of way is which I feel like physically and emotionally, there's a connection to the literary community. And also, I mean, when we're not in a pandemic, we can jump over to the library. We can, and I think that this is happening in all the states, thankfully. And in New York, it's on super drive, I feel like.
That's absolutely right. Lisa?
Yeah, I think the same thing, I think I don't know. It's almost like I almost take it for granted sometimes because it's like there's so many writers and, and just like so much of writing around me. But I thought of how I recently went to my first in-person reading in, a year and a half. And I just missed it so much. I missed it so much. And it wasn't even necessarily about the reading or like the space, but just being able to, run into like acquaintances and people I hadn't seen in person since the beginning of the pandemic, and realizing that sense of like, like deep connections that people have over time, even if we're not necessarily in touch on a regular basis, like knowing that we're all still out there doing the work just feels really good.
And there is something about reconnecting that space IRL that like really means something. I feel like I hosted my first like IRL event not that long ago. It was a very small group of folks in a very large space, but like it felt really good because you get to connect in that kind of special way. Taffy, what about yourself?
I feel like I have like a sort of inverse answer, having been away for so long, that you forget that because there's so many writers here in New York, that being a writer is a kind of affliction. Like to always be narrativizing things and making like observations that not everyone wants. Like that's not a thing that everyone loves.
Really?
Yeah. It's like a lonely thing.
It's so true.
And like when I lived even in New Jersey, where there were other but like when I lived in New Jersey, when I lived in Los Angeles, it was so hard for me because even like it was hard for me to feel so different from everyone. And here it's just like, it's so nice to be a weirdo among other weirdos in a way that I think I once did an NBA story. And I remember watching this team practice and they were all like 6'7", like lumber. And I was like, I'm so glad these people found each other. Like, that they get to hang out with each other and not just be the one weirdo. That's how I feel. I feel like an NBA star. Yes.
I feel like a person that came back and I'm just hanging out with my other.
I just like want to be around my weirdos. Maybe like I know a lot of people who are like, oh, I don't have any writer friends. Like, why? So you could just feel like a freak all the time. Like you could feel like you're the pettiest, most insecure person all the time.
All the time, yeah.
You're like, no, now I've got friends, they can reflect it back to me.
Yes.
I need someone.
You could trauma bond.
I'm petty.
Love that.
Oh, no.
Absolutely, yeah. Somebody that's gonna one up you almost. I'm gonna stick with you real quick so we can go back around the horn this way, but which is where is your favorite reading or writing place in New York?
That's a great question. I love the main branch of the New York Public Library. I've grown, I came back here, and the age I am is like, oh, it hurts my back to sit in the park. Like that's how, and read. And I have not had like a good experience, but I love reading. I love writing in the library. I love reading on the subway. The thing I've missed being behind the wheel of a car. I'm sorry you guys have to deal with my Chris trauma so much, but like being behind the car, you could get into as many books on tape as possible, but there's nothing, like you really still have to drive. And there's nothing as hypnotic as just being in a book as you move along. That's it.
Love that. Real quick note just to say, because I have to say it to you, Taffy. My father had a very long commute growing up. He actually did hold the book on the steering wheel and would look down and look up.
Wow.
Let's not judge him for it. Let's not judge him.
I'm impressed. I am so impressed.
I'm impressed that he pulled over more or there were no accidents. Jacqueline, what about yourself?
Or he's like too busy driving and doesn't realize all the accidents that just happened.
I know, exactly. So no rubbernecking. You know, I have to say,
to read or write or think.
Right now I'm downstairs. I'm hidden away in my office. I've closed the doors, and this is a great place because I can't, no one can hear me. I can't hear anyone. My place in the spring and summer is actually on my roof. just because my neighbor next door built an extra story, and on one side built an extra story, on the other side they have God, I'm totally blanking on the things that help with electricity, solar panels. So no one is ever
Street lights.
Yeah, so it's completely isolated. And I can't, I used to be able to write in public. Like we used to have a cafe called De Jour around the corner that closed, and I loved writing there. But now I realize I'm too nosy. I can't turn off the energy of what's happening around me. And a lot of it is very sad energy post-pandemic, or very stressed energy, or people are just fretting. And I feel like I step out into the world and my skin is peeled back. So it used to be that I could go out into the public and put on my headphones and write, and I can't anymore. I have to be alone. That's why extended day program, the partner goes to work, the son goes to school, and I'm home alone. And when people are here, I have these places to escape to at different extremes in the house.
Can I add? I mean, you've got the solar panels next door. Do you have I'm lucky enough to be in Park Slope. Do you have is there a little bit of a view from the top of the house?
Yeah, so I can look down toward 4th Avenue. I see a lot of trees, so that's what. But we also have a roof garden, so we have a lot of plants and stuff up there, so I can look out and see green. So which is really nice, and bees. So now I'm thinking, oh, maybe I should start, doing honey up there. Maybe I should start gathering bees and stuff. I got big plans. I have all kinds of ways to procrastinate.
You just made me say, oh, I should put a plant on my roof.
Or bees.
Just
no problem. Hive.
Lisa, what about you?
I too used to be very into working in cafes and now find them stressful for a number of reasons. So mostly I just work in my apartment. And in terms of reading, I love reading on the subway if it's like a long commute. Just makes it so much easier. And there's something really just like nice about like being able to tune out everything around you in that way. And then Prospect Park, I think, I live close to it. It's like my backyard. So it's a nice place to go.
Do you have a certain sorry, excuse me for the record, but you have I remember when I first moved here, Prospect Park, I was like, yes, a park. And then you realize, oh, there are many different, I just recently, and I've been here for years at this point, found the abandoned fountains, which used to be wild bathing fountains in the 1800s. And they're just, but do you have a certain section of Prospect Park that you're fond of where the dogs are, or?
I feel like I found those fountains and then I never found them again. So
where are they? I've never seen them.
In my memory.
I'll do this. I'll lead a walk. The three of us.
Oh, I would love that.
I would love that.
From Canarsie to the fountains.
I like there's a part called the Peninsula, and it's got a sole bench right by the water, so I like that. And there's also the Audubon Boathouse, which has nice places to sit with a little backing, so it's kind of and water as well, so you kind of get the best of everything.
Absolutely, I love it. Well, listen, we are coming up to almost the end here, but I'm going to ask one last quick question. But seriously, thank you all so much for this. Thank you for sharing your experiences. Thank you for giving us a little bit of an uplifting love for this city. And of course, thank you to the National Book Foundation and to the New York Public Library for asking us to do this. Thank you to everyone who joined.
Thanks
for your fabulous question.
Yeah, you're great.
No. But in celebration of Taffy's birthday, and Taffy will end with you on this one. Jackie, we're going to start with you. Tell me, Jacqueline, what is your favorite birthday memory in New York City?
That's so funny. When I think, okay, I have two. My 15th birthday was spent at Studio 54 because I was a club kid. So that was, and I remember Grace Jones was there, and it was just, and I was high as a kite. And I just remember wow, she's so beautiful. So, that was a young birthday
Yes.
memory. And I grew up Jehovah's Witness, so I didn't grow up celebrating birthdays till much later. And then I would say when I turned 21, I had a black tie birthday party, and that was when I had a lot of artists and writers friends there, and I was so deeply happy because I had finally found my artist community.
Lisa, what about you?
I feel like I can't compete with being 15 years old at Studio 15.
I'm not. Let's not try. Let's just start over.
It was not that cool at 15. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just suddenly drawn a blank over all the years of my life, but I did really love my pandemic birthday last year. I had the ability to see like 10 close friends in person, outdoors. It was raining. It was like, there was just something very, very sweet and meaningful about it. And the fact that we were able to gather for the first time in like a while, and knowing that we wouldn't be able to see each other again for probably a few months, and kind of just giving people the opportunity to have like casual acquaintance time, like being able to like see friends of friends and like gather in a way that you might normally not, like during that time. Just felt really nice. It was like a reminder, I think, of what feels important.
Oh, it's nice.
Taffy, the right answer is tonight.
The right answer is only tonight.
It's not to know. What is one of your favorite New York birthdays?
So on the day I turned 21, it always vexed me that I have a birthday that appears on game 6 or 7 of the World Series. That is very often a thing that's happening right now. And when I turned 21, the day of, the Yankees won for the first time in a long time. I don't have numbers for you, but someone does. My Uncle Alan, if he's out there, could tell you. And I was at my dorm at NYU, and we were heading to a bar. I wish I remembered which bar it was. I think my college roommate Jen would remember, but we walked out onto the street, and it was like being on the set of a musical. Like people would pick you up and swing you around, and it was my birthday, and it felt like this is what it's like to be 21. And like a man with like, which is, by the way, a very threatening thing to do now that I think about it, but I was young and dumb, and a man would like waltz you down the street, and like a bunch of people would like it was amazing. And I was like, is this what it's just always going to be like?
Oh my goodness.
And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. But like your New York birthday is like, I woke up this morning. If I might get a little emotional. I woke up this morning in the city I wanted to be in for the first birthday in 17 years. And
wow.
I'm just so happy to be here with all of you tonight for like an institution like the New York Public Library, for the National Book Foundation, with all of you New Yorkers. It's been amazing. So this is it. Next year, ask me again next year. It'll be this year.
Yay.
That was incredible. All of you, I'm going to do a round of applause thing. Thank you.
That was awesome. This was so much fun.
So much. I hope you all have an evening filled with a World Series win celebration. Grace Jones and all their beauty, and of course spending all intimate gatherings of friends while also being at Studio 54. I love all of you so much. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye everyone.
Thank you for joining us. For more information and to register for upcoming programs, visit nypl.org/live.